Thank you for attending our Board of Commissioners work session, which begins at 1:30 p.m. We are here today to receive a couple of presentations for us for the 23-24 biennial budget cycle. With that, I'm going to turn things over to our first presenting department. We have our Cobb County DA with us today. Good to see you.
Let me take off my mask. As you see, Commissioners, we brought Rose with us for support.
I hear that.
But before I got started, I wanted to make some presentations to each of you. We have created a coin at the District Attorney's office. And I'll let you see the coin before I start referencing it.
Thank you.
If you look at the coin, you'll see Lady Justice on one side, and above her head, you see the words commitment, candor, compassion, and competence. Those are the words which we live by in the District Attorney's office. And we are truly ministers of justice focused on restorative justice for our community. As you see our, can you next slide, please? As you see our mission statement, there's only one sentence in here I want to focus on, and that is that we are here to enhance public safety and community well-being by supporting victims, holding people who commit crimes accountable. Sometimes I think people forget that the Cobb County District Attorney's Office's primary focus is public safety. And the job that we do ensures that public safety comes to the forefront in our community. So I wanted to highlight that. As we go to the next slide, our challenges and opportunities for improvements. Our biggest challenge is that the number of staff that we have does not meet the service need of our community. We have a big issue with retention and competitive pay. Just over the last year since I've been here in office, we've lost 11 attorneys. 7 of those attorneys left to go to similar jobs for better financial compensation. 2 of those attorneys did not meet the standards by which I wanted them to be in our office, so they were asked to resign, and 1 of those attorneys quit. Our victim advocates have lost 7 victim advocates. 6 of those left for similar jobs in other jurisdictions with better pay. In our investigation division, we lost 7 individuals. And out of those 7, 1 of them went on to a new promotion with better pay, and I can't blame him for that. 2 of them retired. 2 of them did not meet our standards and were released, and 1 left to go to another state agency for better pay. For our administrative people, we've lost 4 people, and each and every one of them for better pay somewhere else for similar jobs. So we see how critical financing and providing the resources that we have for our department is for us keeping our people. The next line, you see that the victim witness is heavily grant funded, and I'll reflect on that later on in the presentation, with 67% of the individuals that we have in victim witness funded by a grant. And just this last week on Thursday, I attended a district attorney's conference, and the first thing they told us about that we were actually going to lose 20% of the grant money that we currently have to pay that 67% of our victim witness. And so, once again, providing the resources that we need is going to be critical for us to do the job that we are asked to do. Things that we can improve on, the early intervention court. This court, as a pilot program, will help to expedite nonviolent cases, part of our restorative justice initiative. And when we say restorative justice initiative, just a word of caution, we're not talking about releasing people out of jail and letting them get away with crimes. But what we are doing is focusing on nonviolent offenders to make sure that we can restore them back to the community, minimize the economic consequences of the criminal justice system so that we don't, as a community, have to take care of them on the back end. This will also give quicker access to our court system, opening up our accountability courts and diversion programs, which provide for lower recidivism rates to make sure we keep our community safer. The reduction in calendar load, it also allows for a reduction in calendar load to allow us to focus on the more serious offenses, those who are committing crimes in our community that harm individuals. Since April of this year, we have started back our criminal trials. Out of all the criminal trials, we've only had one that resulted in someone not being found guilty of the charges. And the ones that we are trying are murderers, are child rapists, those who are harm to the community. So we're focused on making our community safer by making sure we put those people in jail and keep them there. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the District Attorney's general budget and basically the upgrades that we're asking for between the 22 and the 23 and 24 fiscal years. If we could go to the next slide, please. Personnel is the biggest increase. We're asking for an increase of $2.4 million to fund 24 new positions. At the end of this week, we're going to present to each of you a handout that will cover this presentation and also some of the findings that we use to develop these numbers. We'll have that to you by the end of the week so you can see in detail exactly why we're asking for these people and why we need them. And we'll also show you a trail that we have already provided to you in the past that shows where actually most of these individuals we requested when I first took office and came to you the first time and asked you for an increase in personnel. There's only an additional 6 other than when I first came to you in February and asked you for more numbers. Next slide, please. This slide details those positions. First, I'd like to start with the district attorneys, the assistant district attorneys. We need a deputy chief. We had a deputy chief quit, and we have not fulfilled that position. I have indicated to my office that I plan to fulfill it from within, so we are going to start interviewing our own people in November to fill that position. And accountability court personnel. We have an ADA, well, we have 2 ADAs assigned to accountability courts right now, but one of them fills the role of a deputy chief. So he has other responsibilities other than accountability courts. With 4 accountability courts, I definitely need a new accountability court prosecutor. Just the key to what the accountability courts do so that you'll understand the importance that they have. As I told you, we have 4 different accountability courts: drug court, mental health court, veterans court, and family parental court. They provide a highly successful alternative to prosecution with quality, affordable rehabilitation. The numbers are expected to dramatically increase due to the creation of the early intervention court. What the early intervention court does, it gets them into the program, gets them into treatment, which reduces, by all counts of all research, the likelihood that they're going to recidivate. So it helps to keep our community safer. Of the 38 most recent graduates, 34 of them are now gainfully employed in Cobb County. Out of almost 90% of those currently in the program, they are either employed or are enrolled in school full-time. So the accountability courts are doing the job that we are asking of them, protecting our citizens and giving them an opportunity to be restored back to the community as productive citizens. Our sexual assault ADA, our special victims unit, It's a highly specialized prosecution unit. It requires significant training working with child victims and law enforcement. These are the cases most likely to go to trial. And out of the number of trials that we had, all but 3 of them have been from the Special Victims Unit. Presently, we have 5 special victims prosecutors, and each of them has a caseload of over 100+ cases. They each handle 2 of the Superior Court judges. We have another Superior Court judge coming on board in January, so it's imperative that we fill this unit up to maximize its effectiveness, because these are the ones who are actually doing the trials that you see each and every day in Cobb County Superior Court. It's difficult to retain prosecutors in the Special Victims Unit just because of the disturbing nature of the crime that they see. The first time I had an opportunity to go see our Special Victim Unit police officers for the Cobb PD, I was shocked at basically how much our children were victims of crime here in Cobb County. And I'm talking about sexual crime. This unit also requires special victim advocates who are trained and be able to talk to these young men and women who are victimized. That was why it was so important for us to have Rose, so she could help out when we do that. We need an ADA in major case. And just to give you about an idea of major case, they work the homicides in our community. And the homicide rate in Cobb County has doubled over the previous 4 years leading up to 2021, and they continue to rise. We have already had as many murders this year as we did last year. And we're waiting right now to see if a current person that was found dead in a dumpster is actually a murder victim and not someone who was just hid because of other reasons. The prosecution of these cases requires specialized training and experienced prosecutors. Homicide trials take months to prepare and are lengthy. We have had 3 multi-week homicide trials here in Cobb County this year since April, and all of them have resulted in convictions. Presently, I only have 3 prosecutors in this unit, and really it's 2. I have 2 major case prosecutors and 1 who works gangs. At present, we have 59 homicide cases that are pending in our office. In 2020, Cobb County had a total of 41 homicides, and so far this year we've had 31. This is 100% over the previous 4 years, as I said before. This unit also handles gang cases, which are often related to homicide with multiple defendants. And gang cases involve prosecution of multiple co-defendants and underlying crimes, and once again require specialized victim advocates. We need an ADA in elder abuse. Currently, I have 1 ADA who works both white-collar crime and elder abuse, who at the end of this month, is it? Next month. At the end of this month, his wife is due. So he will be out of pocket for quite some time, and we have no one else trained and prepared to handle those type cases. So we are in dire need of that. Elder abuse cases are divided between the trial prosecutors and the white-collar crime. So currently, right now, a white-collar crime prosecutor helps the trial prosecutors to handle any elder abuse cases. And in these cases, physical abuse often occurs in conjunction with theft of income and savings. Adult Protective Services is overwhelmed with investigations of unlicensed nursing and assisted living homes. We are unable to investigate due to lack of personnel. And once again, this requires special victim advocates. And also, our prosecutor heads the elder abuse multidisciplinary team as part of his additional duties. We're asking for an assistant district attorney duty DA. And the purpose of the duty DA is to be that person who answers the phone when someone calls. Because right now what we do is we take somebody out of their courtroom row and set them down as the duty DA to answer all the calls that come into the office requiring answers to the community. And so having a dedicated duty DA and someone who can fill in when we lose people to military duty or to family leave would help out quite a bit. Legal administrative specialists, we need 6 positions. In an ideal world, each assistant district attorney would have their own legal assistant. In our office, we would like that ratio to at least be 2 to 1. Two attorneys to 1 admin specialist. In order to make that happen, we need those 6 additional positions. Investigator, same thing. The ideal world would be 1 to 1. For every attorney, there would be an investigator. But in order to bring it down to 2 to 1, we'd like 6 positions in order to do that. Victim advocate. On our victim advocate positions, we're asking for 6 positions for the sole reason that we are going to lose money through the grants, which means we're going to lose positions. We're asking these 6 positions to be funded by the general fund in order to make sure that we can cover the mandates that are required by us by the Victims' Crimes Bill of Rights. There are certain things that we are mandated to do by that law that without the number of people that we have, we will not be able to do. And just to give you an idea, our victim witnesses handled over 12,000, had 12,000 contacts last year. Or I'm sorry, they've already had 12,000 contacts this year. And so that means they're averaging almost 400 a day. And it really has been hard for them to do that and also do the other things in preparation for trial, preparation, talking to victims, just doing the things that they need to do to make sure that they can do their job properly. We're asking to reclass 5 full-time and two part-time positions. And basically, we're just saying we should pay people for what they do. We're also asking for a part-time ADA, and basically this position will be a floater and also a trainer. And we actually have an ADA on staff right now who will probably retire at the end of this year, but would be willing to come back as a part-time to train the people that we have in staff. Because as you know, most of our attorneys in our office are very young. And they do not have the training necessary to be able to do the job that we are asking them to do, but we are constantly moving forward in that direction to get them there. And that brings us to the next slide, which goes over our operating budget. You'll see we're asking for an increase of 17%, $138,000. If you go to the next slide. The 2 things I want to highlight there are travel, training, and memberships. The travel training budget is necessary for us to have an increase there so we can make sure that our young prosecutors get all the additional training that they need in order to be able to accomplish the tasks that we are asking of them to do. I have told them that if they're interested in doing something different in our office, let us know, and we will try to get them trained as much as possible. Because the current rate that we're going, and I want you to understand that our prosecutors, most of them carry a load, our line prosecutors carry a load of between 300 and 400 cases each. And with a new judge coming on board, and the number of warrants that are currently not served by the sheriff's office that are about to be served, that number is going to increase. Everything else is in support of the new people that we've got coming on board. If I can have the next slide. For our capital budget, we're asking for increases of $90,000 in both 2023 and 2024. If we can get the next slide. And both of those increases are in order to buy additional vehicles to add to our investigator fleet. Currently, right now, most of our investigator fleet is electric, which does not give us the opportunity when we have to reach out of town to go get witnesses, to transport witnesses in a timely manner. So that is the reason for the increase in our capital budget. If I could get the next slide. And so once again, these are the general fund numbers that we're asking for the increase in the next 2 years. Before I move on to our victim witness, are there any questions at this point?
I had a couple of questions, DA, but I don't know if you prefer to wait to the end of your presentation. They were with respect to salaries and pay of your DAs, and how do they compare across the region?
If we look at the big counties, and I'm talking about Fulton, Gwinnett, DeKalb, and our neighbor up north, Cherokee, we are the lowest of that group. And that is one of our biggest issues as far as trying to retain people. Because most of the people that we have that decide to go, and I'll just give you this one story. I had an ADA come into my office with their letter of resignation. And their comment to me was, Mr. Brody, my family needs more money. I love Cobb County. This is my home. I love our office. I love what we're doing with the office. But my family needs more money. And that person was in a position where we couldn't offer them any more without having to, if we offered them more money, it would have tumbled down the dominoes for a whole bunch of other folks. And so we had to bid them for farewell.
And then another position-related question, excuse me, had to do with one of the ADAs you were requesting for a deputy chief.
Mm-hmm.
You stated that one of them was leaving.
We had one leave,
You
yes.
had one leave. Are you looking to have multiple? I'm not familiar with the structure of your office. So
The deputy chiefs, basically, we have four positions for deputy chief.
Mm-hmm.
Each of them has three courtrooms or 3 areas of responsibility that they're responsible for. The one that left, Ms. Yeager, has been doing double duty. She's been acting as a co-chief and also as a deputy chief with that group that's lacks a deputy chief right now.
Okay. So is this a matter of filling a position that you already have, or is this a matter of creating a new position?
Well, in this case, we filled the position with someone on the line side in order to make sure we had another SVU prosecutor. So we need that position, another
Okay.
attorney, in order to fill the deputy chief position.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, did you have any questions?
I have a question on the reclassification of position. There was a line item for $55,000. Is that the salary for the 7 positions, or is that $55,000 reflective of something else?
Basically, it's the total number for when we reclass those, the bump in pay for all of them together.
bump in-
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Continue, please.
All right, we'll move to our victim witness budget. And before I start this, I want to give props to our county manager and also the audit team here in Cobb County. We had an audit done for our victim witness department, and basically they came back with some recommendations of how we needed to structure the victim witness in order to provide better leadership, better supervision, and better accountability for what we do. We took that recommendation to Dr. McMorris. She approved it immediately, and our people have really warmed up to that idea because now they know that we don't have one supervisor and 30 victim advocates. Now we have one supervisor, 3 mid-level supervisor, and then the rest. And so it'll allow for better control, and it'll allow for us to better manage our office and do the things that we need to do. As you see, the proposed increase from 2022 to 2023 is $2,267, and I believe the numbers for 2024 did not increase, right? Okay, so we're not asking for an additional increase in 2024. If you go to the next slide, you'll see the total increase in personnel is just $71,000 or 8% of what we currently have. And we're only requesting one new position. So if you go to the next slide, that one new position is a Judicial Admin Tech 2 with a salary of $64,000. Basically, we need that in order to continue to fulfill our mandates that are required by law. We're also asking for the reclass of the one position from a grade 6 admin specialist to a Judicial Admin Tech grade 9. And that would be a bump and increase of $7,863. Next slide, please. And once again, a review of what we were asking for before, just an increase in total of what we currently are spending. I'm sorry, this is our operating budget. An increase of $16,980. Next slide, please. And I think that was just to get the equipment for the new people that we were asking for. The final slide is our Family Justice Center slide. The personnel is already covered by a grant that runs through 2024, I believe. The grant is able to pay for the Family Justice Director, possible 2 navigators, and possible 2 Family Justice Administrators. Those are 2 things that we will have to come back to the board and ask for. We have not created those positions or are not prepared to start those positions. The operating budget for the Family Justice Center also comes out of that grant, which is $45,000. We also received, and you approved it this morning, a grant from Georgia Power of another $35,000 to help us with the operating expenses for creating the Family Justice Center. The big question that we have for the Family Justice Center, and we thank Sharon for her work on this, is getting prepared to find a building for us to be able to start this. So we know that's a work in progress. We have a deadline of December of 2023 in order to make 2022, I'm sorry, in order to make that happen. But we are under the understanding that we know that it may have to start off small, and so we're prepared to do that. But our partners in the community are prepared to help us out in that respect. Are there any questions on that part?
Yeah, but the Family Justice Center, is Cobb anticipated to have one central location for people to come to, or do you anticipate there being satellites of how people get to different?
We are hoping eventually that we will have one central location.
Okay.
We understand we may have to start it out with the satellite locations, with our partners having their own, still having their own locations instead of everybody being housed under one roof. We know that may be the way we start it, but eventually we'd like to have it all under one roof.
Okay. Are there any questions? Okay.
Let me conclude by saying our office works diligently to serve the citizens of this county. In order to effectively continue to serve the victims of our community, as we abide by the statutory requirements of the Victims' Bill of Rights, our financial needs must be met. As our victim witness is heavily grant funded, without converting these positions to county funding, we will no longer be able to meet statutory requirements. And as I told you before, we've already been told by the PAC that we're going to face a 20% cut in our victim witness funds. And as a result, we will no longer be able to meet the statutory requirements or the needs within our community. Our request for the additional district attorneys, 6 full-time and 1 part-time, will allow us to serve the most vulnerable citizens in our community, as well as provide such needed time out of the courtroom for training. It is imperative that our budget includes the financial means necessary in order to retain qualified, experienced prosecutors and support staff as the population of Cobb County continues to grow. And the technology has advanced that our financial needs require us to keep up pace with these changes that must be met. One of the big things I tell our prosecutors is that I want them to focus on work while they're at work, but I don't want work to be their life. You know, work-life balance is so important. And when I come into the office every morning, I guarantee you 25% of my staff is already there working on that day. When I go home at night, 50% of my staff is still working every single day to make sure that they cover the job that they're doing. And it's not because they want to work so hard, it's because it's necessary for them to do it, because we lack the personnel in order for us to have that work-life balance that we need. That's why it's so important that we're here before you today to ask you for these increases. The other thing that we've done, and you'll see it in the packet that you get by the end of the week, is we've created a chart to fulfill the salaries of the ADAs that we have, the investigators that we have, where at that point in their career, their point in their experience, what they should be getting paid. When we look at that chart, probably about 30%, I say, are outside where they should be. And so we are at risk at losing them to someone else who's willing to pay them for what they're really worth. When I first came on board, I had prosecutors making below $60,000. And I'm not talking about prosecutors that just came out of school and no experience and we have to train fully. These were experienced prosecutors who had been doing this job for 3 to 5 years, making that type of money. But because they love this community, they love Cobb County, they were willing to stay here and wait for somebody to fight for them to get what they deserved. And that's why we're here before you today. That's why all my staff is here. Every leadership person in my staff is here, because they know how important what we do and why we do it is here. And before I go, I just want to say this one thing. And I actually wrote this down too, so let me read what I wrote so that way you will know. I have asked our prosecutors, our victim advocates, our investigators, our admin people to have a presence in our community. This past Friday, we actually read to Compton Elementary School. And in doing so, where's that? I told them the reason why was because I really wanted to focus on what we could do to make our children better. The thing I see more than anything is that our children are being left behind because we are not focusing on them. So these are some of the things that my prosecutors and the team in our office have partnered in. We are sponsoring an All-Pro Dad chapter at Compton Elementary School, where we did our reading on Friday. We're partnering in education with the Cobb Chamber. We're doing monthly resource meetings to make sure that everyone knows where they can get help when they need it. We sponsored a law enforcement mental health symposium because we want people to understand that the trauma that comes with the criminal justice system can be deadly. Georgia itself has had 6 suicides from law enforcement officers in this state this year, 4 of them from Cobb County. We're part of the REACH program for community mentors with the Cobb County School District. Our Swift Justice team regularly shows up at community events, running in 5Ks and 1-mile walks. As a matter of fact, this past weekend, with the help of Rose, they did the Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, where we put out our message about domestic violence in our community. That was run by our Cobb County Domestic Violence Task Force, which is headed by one of our victim advocates, Serpa. We head the Cobb County Elder Abuse Multidisciplinary Team. We also are part of the Cobb County Opioid Abuse Task Force. We are doing so many things in our office for the simple fact that if we can reach these kids as early as possible, we don't have a Pope or a Lassiter High School incident. When I read about those things and I talked to the rabbis locally, Rabbi Severinovich and Rabbi Dorch, about how they felt about it and the way it makes this community look, I want everybody to understand that the criminal justice system here for Cobb County is the first place a community looks for fair and equitable treatment. And as such, we have made it our goal and our mission to reach out to as many kids as possible so they can understand, one, how not to get in trouble, but two, how to raise their expectations to be better students, to be better contributors to our community, and to make our community better. So with that, I thank you for allowing me to present today, understanding that I know we have the same mission, and that is to make Cobb County the best community that it can be. So without any further ado, if there are any more questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, DA Brody. I appreciate your compelling presentation today and for giving us a peek into your world. You know, we sit across opposite sides of the street, but as you shared, we're here for the same purpose. I do have some questions, or at least I'll start off with one question with respect to the positions that we funded earlier. You mentioned it briefly with some of your requests. Can you enlighten us in what it has enabled you to do since you've added those, and what the additional positions again?
Be glad to. We added 2 attorney positions, and those positions, one went to the creation of our early intervention court, which the hard work of Cindy Yeager and John Pursley and our partners in the criminal justice system, the Superior Court judges, Magistrate Court Brendan Murphy. We are actually going to start that court October 18th.
Okay.
What that court is going to do is going to allow us to get those people who are substance abuse, drug users into treatment as soon as possible. And all the research says the sooner you get them into treatment, the better the outcome. And this is important to me because the research I have done, every murderer, every rapist that comes across our desks at some time in their life started with substance abuse. And if we can treat them and get them fixed at that level, they never become our murderers and rapists. So that makes our community safer. And I started this off by saying I wanted to highlight the fact that our goal was public safety. And so we're taking that approach to make sure that let's fix them early, whether they be kids, young adults, and then make sure they never get to the point where they become the murderers and rapists. So it's so critical for us to do that. The 2 admin people also are supporting that because of the requirement for us to do accusations, to do notices and everything. It's going to be critical for them to be able to do that. And the same thing with our investigators, because it's going to require us to run checks. It's going to require us to be able to do a lot of front-end work to make this thing work. So that's what we did with that first 6. We also, we actually got 7 from you. We started a communications person. She has been doing a wonderful job covering a lot of the different things that we do here in the community, writing up our press releases, working with Ross to make sure that people are understanding what we're doing, to include doing a PSA just last week for the hate crimes that we saw at Pope and Laster, and also for the domestic violence awareness that we did.
All right, thank you. And it's a significant accomplishment for what's going to happen on the 18th. Please, help share that info with us so we can get it out there, because we didn't fund many positions with our last budget, but we thought that was a priority to help move those lower level offenders through the system faster, more holistically. So
it has been a tremendous help, and I thank all the commissioners for that.
Great, thank you.
Before I go, I want to thank those who helped us. If Bill Volkman can come up, if Susan Revel is here, and also Buddy, if he's here. I know Dina, I know she's bugged you guys so much. But I just want to thank y'all for what you do and how important you guys are to the community.
Thank you. Appreciate your acknowledgement.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Commissioners, let's take a break for probably until about 2:20, because, yep, we'll come back. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to our work session this October 12th, 2021. We are continuing our departmental and agency presentations for the 23-24 biennial budget cycle. And next up, we have Drew Ressler with DOT.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman, Commissioners, County Manager. We really appreciate your time this afternoon. Before I jump in, thank you, a disclaimer, and then one more thank you. First, I want to thank the Cobb DOT team. They're here today. We'll talk about them in brief when we show our organizational chart, but they do phenomenal work every day, making sure that the lights are red, yellow, green, the grass is cut, the buses are running on time, the planes are landing. A very diverse service that is provided by the Department of Transportation, and they do a phenomenal job every day with that and helping to put together these proposals. So I just want to say very publicly thank you to them. A disclaimer about the presentation. So we went through the original format and landed with 124 slides. So we didn't want to do that to y'all. Late on a Tuesday afternoon after a morning meeting. So we did pull out some of the line item detail. We have that detail. It's all based on that detail. We will provide that to you so that you have. Really want to talk today about high level, what our needs and opportunities are at DOT. And then finally, I want to say thank you to you all. It's overwhelming sitting out there, listening to all of the needs, the increasing service demands, and the flat staffing levels and the flat budgets from department after department. It's overwhelming to me, and I get to stand on this side of the rail. So we recognize as a leadership team that the decisions in front of you are very difficult. They're very big, they're very complicated. So we appreciate, I'll echo what the other department managers have said. We really appreciate just this opportunity of being able to come to you, speak very openly and publicly about some of the things that are going well, some of the areas where we're struggling, and some of the areas where we have opportunity. So with that, I will jump in. You see our mission statement here. We plan, design, manage, and operate a multimodal transportation system that is fiscally responsible, safe, and efficient. But more than that, we talked as we put this together about 3 I's within the Department of Transportation. The first of those is impressions. So transportation is the first and lasting impression of the county and the county government. It's the thing that folks see the first time they come to Cobb County, whether they drive into Cobb County or they fly into our airport. The transportation system and the facilities that we operate, maintain, and construct, it's the first thing they see. It's the thing they see every day. And so we take to heart the responsibility of making that a good first impression, a good lasting impression. Impact. We have such an opportunity at transportation to impact the lives of our residents, the lives of those who come to Cobb County, both in terms of safety, emergency, resilience, the efficiency, and even reliability of our transportation network. It has such an opportunity to impact our residents. And then finally, importance. It's really the foundation of the community and foundation of all of the other services and activities that happen here within the county. So I spoke about our organizational chart. You see it here. We cover a broad range of services at Department of Transportation. So you see here the deputy directors that we've discussed. Those are, we've begun interviews actually yesterday on those, looking forward to fill those positions. But they're split functionally into operations, which is, as you see here, traffic operations. We have Brooke Martin here today, and just raise your hand so that they see you. Road maintenance, Dallas Kane. Streetlight program is Jeff Burns. And then our utility permitting manager is Phyllis. And then within the intermodal section, we have our airport division manager, Carl. And then our transit division manager, Andrea. And then within program management, we have Michael Francis here today. And then planning, we have Laura. And then Patrick's not here with us today, but he's our right-of-way division manager. And then Bill manages our surveying group. And then, of course, our SPLOST program management team that helps us deliver on our SPLOST programs. And then finally, on the right side, we see those staff members that support the entire department. And we have Jennifer, who a lot of great work by this team but behind me, but Jennifer probably most of all in pulling all of this together. So challenges and opportunities. So you see them here. Break cycle of responsive maintenance. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Improve our resilience to emergencies as they happen, address increasing service demands, and then finally improving that customer service experience. One of our attorneys, when he comes and speaks in an executive, will talk about the bottom line up front. So we'll share that here. The bottom line up front for the general fund is $9.5 million inclusive of the personnel, operating, and capital requests. The thing to keep in mind about the department, just to share this real quickly, of the 10 or so divisions that you see up here, half of those operate out of other revenue sources. So we have engineering that operates with SPLOST funds, streetlights brings in streetlight district funds, utility permitting brings in permitting, and then transit, of course, with fares, and then finally airport with the funds that are generated on the airport. So those are mentioned here, but just to keep in mind that those divisions do deal in revenue either that they generate or SPLOST revenues. So first, road maintenance. So we talk a lot at DOT about being data-driven and proactive in our approach. That's our goal. That's where we want to go. But we're not there. We're request-driven and reactive. Just to illustrate that, on an annual basis, and you'll see a graph here in a moment, we have about 7,500 work orders. We track how many of those are generated internally versus how many come to us from the outside. Only 7% of those 7,500 work orders are generated externally. And as a citizen, before I got into this line of work, you drive down the road, you see a pothole, you see the grass is a little bit long, you see a crack in the sidewalk, you assume they will take care of it. I'm here to say they don't know about it. And so if we don't hear about it, we don't know about it. And so we take that to heart and try to be very responsive with the citizen request, but we are at the moment very reactive in what we do. And so just to illustrate this, when I first came back to Cobb County, fortunate to live close enough to school to be able to walk. And so we're walking first day of school, and I notice a sidewalk that's about 2 inches off, a tripping hazard, right in front of the school. So I put in a work request. I didn't send it through my email just to recognize what's it like to be a citizen that inputs a request. That sidewalk was fixed, and it was fixed well. It was fixed very professionally, but it was fixed around Thanksgiving. So we're looking at lead times of 3 to 4 months in fixing some of these issues that are truly safety-related issues. The other thing that we've got going is in terms of bringing in requests. So this is a fairly complicated graph that I'll give you a moment to try to digest. And what it shows is non-mowing work orders and non-mowing personnel. The reason we did that is because when mowing came in-house, we talked about impressions. Mowing is that thing that is most visible. We make mowing work. And so in order to make mowing work, we have to take 9 personnel from other sections, from drainage, from asphalt, from concrete, within road maintenance, to make mowing work. When we do that, we effectively dropped the number of personnel. We had personnel added when we brought it in-house, but it wasn't sufficient to meet the demands of today. And so effectively, in 2016, we had more personnel dedicated to non-mowing work than we do today. At the same time, with fewer staff, we also have increasing number of work orders. So you see in 2016, we really began the push to hear more from the public. So we introduced Cartograph, which is our work order management system, YourGov, in-house, and then finally SeeClickFix most recently, where we're bringing in more and more of those requests. And so you see our work orders have increased. Mm-hmm. And really where we are today is many more work orders than we were in 2016 and less effective staff.
Hi, Drew. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just perplexed. When we brought the mowing contracts in-house, is this what is impacting this? Because I perceive that we were adding additional staff. Did we just move staff around to facilitate that?
I appreciate the question. So we did add additional staff, but it was not sufficient to meet the demands.
Okay.
And so we brought in, I think added approximately 20 new staffing to make mowing work in-house. but it wasn't sufficient, or it's not sufficient today to meet the ongoing. So during the mowing season, that March to October season, we transfer staff out. And so that's what precipitated the drop in 2018 when that mowing came in-house. It's more than 9 that work on that. So then at a very high level, some of the other challenges and opportunities. The challenge one that we wanted to talk about, and we've worked very closely with our partners at Fleet, is vehicles. So you see here on the surface, it looks like a great pickup or a dump truck, a tandem, but it's 20 years, approaching 20 years old, more than 250,000 miles. We have 4 of these that are the backbone of the road maintenance division. We use them on everything except for mowing, from asphalt to drainage to concrete. And so they're approaching the end of their useful life, and they are expensive to replace. The other challenge and opportunity is with satellite locations. So just to illustrate this, we're coming up on a year from Zeta. And if you remember that storm event, overnight we had 426 separate locations where trees were down blocking the roadway. This is not just down across the county. That number was much higher. This is trees down within the roadway blocking the road. And so we had to respond everything out of the hub. And so we're over on county services dispatching to and from that location. And occasionally they could go hit multiple locations, but everything came in and out of that hub. And so just to look at a couple of the travel times, to get from our hub to, say, Sandy Plains at Wesley Chapel is 39 minutes, to Columns at Atlanta Country Club, 38 minutes, Riverside at Six Flags, 37 minutes, Cedar Crest to Ackworth Dallas, 43 minutes. So if we imagine this was an emergency, we were there, we were dispatching, that's what the times were. In the middle of the night, we also add an hour to allow the on-call staff to get to the DOT facility. So if it takes them an hour to get in, another 20 minutes or so to get all the equipment they need to then go back out, we could get notified of an emergency, and it'd be 2 hours later before we're on site. And we have great respect and great relationships with our first responders and police and fire, but these guys that are going out in the middle of the night clearing roads are every bit as much first responders, and 2 hours to get out there is a long time. And then finally, litter. Wanted to clarify a little bit from the meeting this morning. The requests we have here are complementary to Keep Cobb Beautiful. It's not by any means competitive. We're not trying to take anything away from Keep Cobb Beautiful. Do you have a question?
No question. I'm glad to hear that. I always consider it to work in partnership or in tandem with, because, I mean, most of the litter is on right-of-way, and so we've just had we've always enjoyed responsiveness from both agencies with respect to litter.
We did, and we've got a great working relationship. So Keep Cobb Beautiful, of course, manages the Adopt a Mile and many of the team cleanups. DOT staff works in partnership with them to pick up the orange bags when there is a cleanup event. We, of course, pick up trash in front of our staff when they're out mowing. So it is truly a partnership. But just to illustrate, we've seen litter increase year over year. This was trash from 1 month. We spoke about this when Solid Waste gave a presentation. But in 1 month, our folks picked up 27.7 tons of trash. So it's 35 feet long by 16 feet tall and just as wide. So just in 1 month of picking up trash and stacking it up. So significant resource issue. Of the 7,500 work requests, 1,000 of those are litter related. So the request. First is 9 positions to eliminate the transfer of staff to mowing. That's crew level positions that would allow us to keep the mowing whole and help us during the mowing season to not be short-staffed in other areas. And then also 11 crew-level positions to address work order frequency, just what I talked about with that issue of the sidewalk, reducing lead times on work requests from 4 months, in a lot of cases, to as quick as 2 weeks when it's a concrete or a drainage type issue, and really position the department as being more proactive to maintenance needs rather than reactive. Enhanced litter cleanup and landscape maintenance, and of course improved reduced risk from emergency maintenance needs, just by having those staff members much closer to issues as they're occurring. The operating request, $412,000. About half of that is the contract debris removal. So we, just in Zeta alone, we spent $500,000 picking up trees off the right-of-way with contracted services in addition to internal staff. So this would allow us to be more responsive to those wind events. And then finally, the capital request to replace 23 vehicles that are end of life, as well as construction of a satellite facility to help with our responsiveness, both in regular work as well as in emergencies. And then you see the bottom line request there for road maintenance. And I'll pause before I move on to traffic operations. This is
Yes.
probably the biggest section of our request.
Can you go back to that slide that had the number of positions, the 21 positions? Yeah. Can I
Absolutely.
just-
Like I said, we've got the detail outlining each one of these.
Yes, Commissioner.
Do we have a plan to know how we would reduce those lead times from 4 months to 2 weeks? Like, is that something that is within reach?
We believe it is. So we've looked at the frequency of requests as they're coming in and how long it's taking us before we can, so we action off a work order pretty quickly off of those requests. It's just a matter of staffing to be able to get to those works where they're going through and walking through their process and what's in close proximity. So it was just a function of how many requests are coming in versus how much staff we have to handle it.
Okay, that's good to know, because I know with some other vendor type of arrangements, there are some supply chain issues that come into that lead time, but it seems like that doesn't play as much of a role here.
So we've been fortunate, we've been well supported in terms of specialty vehicles. So we have our own concrete mixing truck that's helped us with a lot of sidewalk repairs type work. Much of those 7,500 work requests are far more labor intensive than they are material intensive. So, and then we work to make sure that our warehouse is well stocked. So this is, the request and the challenge in road maintenance is primarily a workforce challenge rather than a material challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that was the heaviest one so far, of the presentation. So take a deep breath. We're doing good. So next is traffic operations. So traffic operations has three sections within it. We have the traffic signals section that does our studies and maintenance of traffic signals. We have our operations, our TMC, where they manage day-to-day operations of the system, and then finally our traffic engineering group. And so some of the operations and challenges. So traffic signals. So the most important thing that we can do on traffic signals is to do a preventative maintenance inspection. So we do a little bit better with traffic signals than we do elsewhere, where we're about 26% internally generated work orders. And just to illustrate why these are so important, we did a preventative maintenance inspection on a traffic signal at Bells Ferry at Hawkins Store. During that inspection, they found that one of the wires that was running these heads, the coating had rubbed loose, and it actually energized the signal pole. And so you can imagine if we weren't the ones to find that, a pedestrian walks up to push a PED button to cross the road, there could have been a major incident there. So preventative maintenance inspections are very, very critical. These traffic signals are high technology, complicated technology that really take someone being there and being there routinely. If we get to a position in traffic signals where we get more reactive with the maintenance of traffic signals, then we're going to have more and more safety issues resulting from that. And so to speak to this, Federal Highway has put out some ratios saying, here's how much staff you need compared to the number of signals. So based on our current staffing levels, we're staffed to well maintain 490 traffic signals. Cobb County has 581. So the challenge is keeping up with those preventative maintenance inspections as those 74% of work orders are continually coming in and trying to balance that issue between. And then in our traffic management center, it's a phenomenal facility, and it really is one of the premier regional traffic management centers in the Southeast. And we've been contacted by other cities, Nashville most recently, to come see our TMC, how it operates, and some of the relationships there. And just to talk about partnerships just very briefly, having PD actually have an office, Lieutenant Lorenz has an office off of this room, has been incredible for our coordination efforts between us and the police department. The TMC, based on a study shortly after it was built, was determined to have a 7-year return on investment of $830,000 a year. So in 7 years to be able to have paid itself off. We currently operate it with 1 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff members. And so the request there is to capitalize and leverage this investment, this great facility, and utilize it better than we are currently utilizing it today. And then finally, traffic calming. So right now, I know this is one of the requests that we see most often. I know it's one of the requests that you all see most often. And to speak at a very high level, right now in traffic calming, we're bound by our policies and we're bound by funding. And so to the policy side of it, we're currently looking through some of the data to determine where we have the greatest need for traffic calming improvement measures. So we have speed data available to us from some of the outside sources on what the prevailing speeds are on all of our roads in the county. So we're working through a process to compare those speeds to the posted speed limit to determine where the need is greatest, and then work on policy measures coming off of that. Right now, as you know, we're very request-driven in our policies. So it takes, again, someone contacting us before we'll go out and do a study and analyze it just based on the history of those policies. So that's one side of it that we're currently working on is outside of this request. The other side is funding. So some funding to be able to, as we modify those and improve those policies, to be able to do more in the public as we hear more that this is a key safety issue and quality of life issue, to be able to implement those strategies. So the request for operations is 2 traffic signal technicians. This would appropriately staff us for the number of traffic signals that we have and allow us to stay on top of those preventative maintenance inspections. 1 engineering technician for the TMC, that would be a full-time staff to help further leverage the great work that's done in that room where they're catching crashes as they're happening in real time and making timing adjustments to the system to mitigate some of those impacts and pushing out information on that. An engineering technician to help with the traffic calming program to validate the data that we do have. Traffic signs and marking technician to help make sure that we're staying on top of our signing and marking work orders. And finally, a traffic timing analyst. We have, like I said, 581 traffic signals right now, just 1 signal timing analyst. So as we get calls about, hey, this corridor is mistimed, we really only have 1 person that we can apply to that corridor and all of the corridors throughout the county to improve those timings. Within the operating request for operations, $150,000 for traffic calming, some subscription services, new replacement computers, and then finally a conflict monitor tester. Just for a moment, that piece of equipment is probably the most important piece of equipment in a traffic signal. So the worst thing that you can have happen at a traffic signal is what we call a conflicting greens, sending traffic into the intersection and causing a crash there from the way the signals are timed. And so what the conflict monitor does is it looks for nothing else other than conflicting greens, areas where the signal is malfunctioning, it's a safety hazard, it'll flip it into flash very quickly. And so a new tester for our conflict monitors as we do our preventative maintenance inspections. And then finally, capital replacement, again, just like road maintenance, just like many of our field staff, the bucket trucks are the offices of our traffic signal technicians. So we're requesting to replace 2 vehicles that have far exceeded their useful life, purchasing vehicles for the additional staff, and then you see here a sign shop printer, and then replacement of an end-of-life mobile speed trailer. And then you see here a much lower request for traffic operations than road maintenance, $7 million total between personnel, operating, and capital. Now, those were the 2 largest, so I'll pause again for any questions that you have. Very good. Planning. So from two very large divisions to one very small division. Planning is made up of three individuals. So you all know Laura, you've met her. She has a planner and a grants administrator. And this is her current portfolio. So right now we are leveraging $72 million of local dollars to bring in from federal and state sources $204 million. So for every dollar that's applied on a local level, we're bringing in, her section is bringing in, managing, and closing out 3 times state federal dollars with that. Again, with a staff of just 3. And so she's able to manage this portfolio as it is, but being sure that we're being very equitable in the grants that we're applying for, in the management of those, and being effectively leveraging not just the sources that are dedicated to leverage, but more of our SPLOST components. The request is to add another planner so that she can divide her division into functional areas. Roadway, intermodal, which would be transit and airport, and then active transportation, that would be sidewalks, trails, bicycle infrastructure. And so she would be, the planning division would be much better structured, and then an administrative specialist, again, to make sure that we're carefully tracking and applying for all of the opportunities and taking advantage of all the different opportunities. As we have ARPA and the infrastructure bill and all of these things coming out, there's a heavy lift on the local side to make sure that we're being competitive with those and that we're not missing an opportunity. So you see the request here, inclusive of personnel and operating, for a net increase of $168,000. Within engineering, and I'll specify with engineering, there are 2 components that you'll see here. There's the general fund side of it, as well as the SPLOST side of it, one of those divisions that we're getting into the territory of now working in additional funds other than just general fund. But this is the general fund request. And so the request here is a contract project manager. As we have more and more inspections, in this, again, speaking of partnerships, we have a great relationship with community development. And primarily, if it's a new development, they're inspecting, but we do have increasing numbers of specialty requests where they want to utilize soil cement or some other methodology, construction means and methods that has been determined or they're claiming is equivalent to what's in the standards. And so when it gets into that specialty type work, or it's a CID type project or something like that, just making sure that we are protecting the public's investment in the public infrastructure, that's the purpose of that particular request. And then the engineer 4 is requested to help with our land development section. So I know y'all spend a lot of time working on zoning and variances and land development questions. We do too. And we know a lot of the questions generally come down to traffic impacts. And what we're seeing, and I can name a number of recent cases where the developers are coming in on the Wednesday prior to a Tuesday meeting with substantial changes to their site plan, substantial changes to their traffic study, and we are scrambling amidst all of the other meetings and everything else that's going on. Again, in a staff that's just 3, our land development section is just 3 folks, scrambling to try to get meaningful results and advice back to you all so that you can make an informed decision. With effectively 3 business days to do that has been very challenging, and so this would allow us additional capacity to do that. So you see here the request for the engineering budget. And then within administration, as we've talked about all these different funding sources, all these streams and opportunities, just an additional accountant to help with financial controls, an administrative specialist to help in our finance group, again, to make sure that we are being very effective with the funds that we do have, and then an HR generalist to help with recruitment, retention services, onboarding for the department. We, of course, participate in the countywide onboarding, but this would allow us more opportunity to onboard into the department, and then expanded training and development opportunities. And the request for administration. All right, now we're moving more into special funds. And y'all please interrupt me as I go. So I gave a disclaimer at the beginning. I will give one more here. Utilities is one area where we have to very closely watch what's going on at the Gold Dome in particular, but also in DC to see what the impact is. And so there's actually, we'll be speaking at a committee hearing on Thursday where they're talking about some changes to the 811 law that would mandate our traffic signals be involved in that. So that may have additional impacts that are not included here if we are required to join 811. That's outside of this particular presentation, but be glad to meet with you and speak with you about those potential impacts at another time. But this is just to say a big portion of Phyllis's job is making sure that she's up to date on everything that's going on in Atlanta and in DC to see what those impacts are to her staff, but more importantly, to the public right-of-way. So the request here is to utilize utility funds to replace 2 end-of-life inspector vehicles. Again, these are their mobile offices. They've come to end of life, and so the request is to replace those. Now we move into SPLOST. So what we've seen, we've been so very thankful that just over this last year, just to name a couple events, on March 9th, the board approved $3 million from revenue above projection to go towards drainage infrastructure projects. On July 13th, the board also approved $4.8 million from 2005 SPLOST funds to again apply towards drainage funds. So that's a total of $7.3 million just over the last 6 months that it's been applied to drainage infrastructure. We've committed all of those dollars. And so any new project that comes up is starting to eat into the 2022 SPLOST that will begin next year. Just out of the storms that many of the citizens spoke about in early September, we had 7 projects pop up from that storm. And so and the total cost of those projects is about $1.8 million. And so we've been very successful in pushing out more and more drainage projects. But the challenging thing is it seems as we push more and more out, more and more and more are coming in. And we have loaded up and pushed our contractors to capacity. And so the request here is to add a drainage crew that would allow us to internally manage those drainage projects utilizing SPLOST funds. It'd be SPLOST funded positions so that we can realize some internal savings. Probably can't use them for major 20 feet, 92-inch type drainage replacement projects, but for shallower projects, we have shown an ability when we have staff to be able to realize some savings compared to the private sector. And really not to compete with them at all, but just to add more capacity to an area where we're struggling to keep up. And so you see there the request that is SPLOST funds out of that drainage component. I'm sorry, I did miss one other. One engineering technician, this would be for our survey group. So we've seen an ability to survey projects, to move projects much faster when we survey them in-house for much less cost. And so the request is to add an engineering technician, again, SPLOST funded, to be able to create, instead of just one field survey crew, 2 field survey crews.
Drew, can you help me understand how that works from a funding perspective? And forgive me if I missed your explanation of this, but if this is a SPLOST personal request, how does this come out of SPLOST funds? What particular line item with this?
I may need to defer to Bill for some of the inner workings there, but they effectively, the time that they spend, they charge their time to the SPLOST program that they're working on.
So we would have paid that to someone else anyway?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you.
The airport, this is where we're actually requesting, I think, a slight decrease in budget, but just to demonstrate some of what we have at the airport, we've seen incredible growth in the utilization at the airport. When COVID hit March a year ago, there was a small dip for maybe about a month or 2, and then it came back, and it came back stronger than ever. And so we've seen all of our international, our local flights have really increased the frequency there. And we do it with very small staff. One of the sayings that I've learned from Carl is, from pilots, is if you've seen One airport, you've seen one airport because they're all very different. And so you see here the numbers. We try to do some comparisons across the board, but trying to find a true one-to-one comparison in services in different departments with different constraints. In this case, different airports, different numbers of runways, different land. It's very difficult to do a true comparison, but did want to share that we are one of the smaller, or the smallest of staff of these that we've compared to. We are requesting personnel and capital within the airport, and these are, again, all airport funds. This is not a general fund request, but a full-time equipment operator. We've had a part-time equipment operator, but a full-time would allow us more time on the airport campus. And again, what we talked about at the beginning, in terms of impressions, this would allow us to really set our best foot forward when someone does fly in, and the first thing they see of Cobb County is our airport. Also, a dump pickup truck for $85,000. And what you'll see is even with those requests, the total requested funding for 2023 out of the airport fund is less than 2022. The reason for that being the customs facility has entered the part of the contract with our FBO where they will now take care of the customs cost. And so it's really a wash between these additional requests and then the customs facility coming off of our books. And then finally, transit. I'll pause there for any questions. Chairman, did you have a question?
No, sir.
Okay.
Questions from commissioners? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So transit. So you see, again, here, we did add our line item requests. We are striving towards a flat general fund contribution, but there are some specific requests. We'll talk in more detail about that. This does show an increase currently of about $1.5 million in transfers to the general fund transit component, and to describe that in more detail. So as we've talked, the structure of the transit division in First Transit is we have very minimal staff that is county staff operating our transit system. The vast majority of transit staff that wear a Cobb County logo are contracted staff. And as part of that, as part of the contract that we have with our transit provider, they provide the customer service. And so this request would bring that customer service in-house, would allow us to very closely and carefully on the Cobb County side of it, just to have a better structure here where we would receive those requests, we would do the investigation, and then we would make any changes needed based on that, and not have the contractor with their own customer service staff. Now, the reason why those numbers remain high that you see here is we are anticipating an offset in cost. If we are funding, if they have 7 personnel that are taking care of this currently. So if we bring that in-house, they will no longer need to provide that. We will no longer need to pay for that out of our contract. We're in contract cycles, so we're trying to work through exactly what that mechanism is of how we bring that staff on internally, how we roll that staff off externally, and what exactly that offset would be. So right now we're just showing what that increase would be, but we wouldn't add these positions without a commensurate reduction in the contract cost. So you see here again that request in personnel. I'm sorry, this is the operating request. Okay. I will highlight a couple of these. You'll see here the operating service fees at $2.6 million. That is where we anticipate. We were anticipating an offset of about $500,000 from bringing customer service in-house. And so there is still an increase in operating service fees expected. And so the primary is just the contractual funding mechanisms that are triggered year over year that we anticipate just increase costs in order to deliver service. The IT subscription fees is another area where the contractor manages all of the software and licenses for our paratransit reservation and scheduling. And so, again, similar to customer service, requesting to bring that in-house, it does show that as an increase. Again, we would anticipate that to also be offset in some of the operating service fees. And then finally, annual maintenance and support contracts. So just based on our aging infrastructure in transit, just like the rest of the county, the need for these critical maintenance services at a request of $229,000, and you see those there, so I won't go through those in great detail, but you see very specifically what the requests are for operating. We do have the opportunity with CARES to also look at not just the offsets with the trapeze and the customer service, but also CARES funds to keep this as a flat request to the general fund. So we continue to explore exactly what those offsets will be, what the right allocation of CARES funding is that's dedicated to transit operating, and we'll work with you very closely on what the final is. But wanted to share with you some of the initiatives that we were interested in pursuing. And then finally, within capital, aging infrastructure coming to need to repave some of our park and ride lots. Finally, streetlights. So this is a great picture. This is a really, really cool bridge, and it is really the gateway to the county if you're coming down 75 from the north. This is both a challenge and an opportunity. So back to impressions, this is a great first impression when all the lights are working. And so the challenge is not all the lights are working. And so we've had a lot of these decorative bridges be built over time, and they're phenomenal assets. They look great. But when the capital was assigned to be able to build the bridges, the operating did not follow with it. We are not able to fund those out of special streetlight district funds. So this would be a general fund operating request to be able to have sufficient funding to make sure that these lights are operating appropriately in perpetuity. And so to that, a little bit about streetlights, you'll see here two separate requests. That's because there's two separate funding sources. So there's the funds brought in to the streetlight district fund that's paid for out of the water bill. And those are streetlights within neighborhoods, within special streetlight district areas. And then there's the general fund. These are more county-wide benefits. And so this would be illumination of an intersection, illumination of a dip in the road that needs to be lit at night, things like that. And so you see here a request of about $410,000, half of it going towards the illumination, ongoing maintenance and operation of the decorative bridges, the other half going towards critical intersections. And then there is an opportunity here. We've heard a lot about lighting on the trails, which we do not currently have. This would allow for some funding to expand the lighting on those critical trail sections. And then within the streetlight district, these would be all of the district funds that are collected outside of the general fund to reinvest back into the streetlight districts, the maintenance and repair costs for that infrastructure.
Drew, I have a request in this area that we've been discussing in the county for some time, but we have some major corridors that do not have adequate lighting for either pedestrian safety, primarily pedestrian safety when at night when their vehicles traveling, but some may argue that lighting is also needed for, vehicle safety. There has been discussion about putting aside funds so that each district had, at least a couple of major corridors that were funded through the general fund. I'll let you respond and then.
Sure. So we'd be glad to provide a typical cost per mile for illumination of corridors. The one thing that I'll ask that the board keep in mind is there's really two costs associated with that.
Okay.
There's the cost to add additional lighting that you would expect, but there's also consider the cost of the existing major corridors that already have established streetlight districts that are paying for that separately within a streetlight district on their water bill.
Okay.
So it would be both the cost to add that illumination as well as a cost to consider if we're being equitable on, say, arterial roads. We need to do a survey of all those arterial roads that have special streetlight districts and potentially look to bring those into the general fund as well.
I need your help in
course.
determining how to be equitable with that, because I do believe that there are already some corridors that are funded through the general fund. And if I'm wrong, I just need for that to be clear. My concern is that it is not an apples-to-apples comparison for us to approach streetlight districts in every community the same way. There's some areas that are, or neighborhoods that are conducive to people walking around and getting petitions from a property owner. There are some areas where that is not an effective way. And I feel like it's unduly hampering those communities that don't have that opportunity. But if they have a pedestrian-heavy area or unsafe area, it's putting a lot of people at risk of not having adequate lighting. And this has been an ongoing issue. I know that's been discussed since I've been here, but I'm looking for us to see from a policy perspective how that can be modified. But at the end of the day, there may be areas that, again, that don't have that petition process that still may need to be funded. So maybe there's a couple of equity lenses to look through. How do you equitably fund it, but how do you equitably make sure all communities have safe lighting?
Of course.
Because they cannot be equitably served through the existing policy.
Of course.
Yeah.
We'll dive into that a little bit more and provide you some information and some options on how
I would love
that can be done.
to help fund that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you see that overall, we won't go through these in great detail, but the overall request and then a summary, a department-wide summary. So it's about $9.5 million to the general fund that's being requested, and then an overall request of $13 million when you incorporate those special funds. That is the end of our presentation. Again, I just want to echo how appreciative we are for the opportunity to be able to come and speak very openly about some of the things going on within the department.
That's great. And another thing that I had that I didn't mention before, too, is it gets to the issue of equity of sorts, and I'm trying to push myself to look at things through that lens, but we have a number of state routes in the county that don't get the same level of service as the ones that we maintain, and it's not like I'm trying to pile the world on you, Dallas, because I know you have enough just with our current road systems, but when you talked about first impression, there's nobody that's saying I'm driving along this roadway, oh, it must be a state route, therefore, oh, it may not be upkept to what we perceive as expected level of how things are upkept in Cobb. And this, I think, would perhaps take funding, but I would look to see if there's a way that we can have some type of agreement. If the state isn't going to do a better job, can we have some type of intergovernmental agreement where we take over the maintenance of it? And either with our staff or with a third party.
Sure. I'll suggest and we'll be glad to provide more information. The model that has been very successful is the model that the CIDs have utilized.
Okay.
So if you're driving around and you'll notice as you come up 75 from Atlanta, you'll see once you get into Cumberland CID, you'll see some of the interchanges they look great. They're fully landscaped and they've got all kinds of crepe myrtles and shrubs and all kinds of, it looks really good. So what they have done is they've entered almost like where we allow landscape licenses for subdivisions to come in and to landscape around their neighborhood sign. It's a very similar model where counties have just as much opportunity as CIDs. It's just the funding question, but where we can go and propose a plan, develop a plan and it's landscaping, but propose that to the Department of Transportation. They have specific criteria that have to be met that are fairly stringent, but if we check all those boxes, we're able to install that and then maintain it. So I would suggest that would be a model worth pursuing.
Okay.
I would caution the board away from getting into maintenance of, say, the asphalt infrastructure or the sidewalk infrastructure, because that's going to create a much higher expense than just the landscape. I think the landscaping would help with that impression question.
Great, thank you. Did the commissioners have any questions for Drew? Just thank you for all that you and the team do. I know that calls and requests to commissioners a lot of times revolve around transportation requests, and you guys have been so responsive to us, and especially at a time right now where we're going through the comprehensive transportation plan, preparing for the referendum next year, and I just want to say thank you. You know, all of these discussions are eye-opening to me to learn just how much people are doing with the little that they have, but you guys have done a great job with what you have. Just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. County Manager, does that conclude our presentations for today? Thank you guys for your patience today. Thank you for participating in our work session, and hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.